warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We are meeting today on a sad occasion of the passing away of Professor Emeritus Muhammad Kamal Hassan. He was a great Muslim exemplary, and he passed away due to post-surgery complications from pancreatic cancer. I knew him for 30 years. He was a scholar, a man of simplicity, dignity, and most important, piety, full of taqwa. He was born in 1942 in Kelantan, got his BA honors from University of Malaya in 1966, MA, MPhil, PhD from Columbia University in New York in 1970, 73, 76. And Columbia University in New York is the center for Southeast Asian studies. So he studied with Professor William Roth, the famous Southeast Asian scholar. So he has that legacy, just like I have the legacy of Professor Ismail al-Faruqi. As a young Muslim scholar, he was an activist, a member of Istac-Iium, as well as the project of Islamization of knowledge. When you look into his biography, and I've searched for him for a long time, in 1982, he joined one of the first seminars on Islamization of knowledge, which was organized by Professor Ismail al-Faruqi at the Islamic University in Pakistan in 1982. And at that time, there were two Malaysians who had joined. There were 50 scholars, but the two Malaysians who joined the 1982 Islamization conference in Islamabad was Professor Kamal Hassan and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. And the proceedings of that book has been published. The seminar was sponsored, as I said, by the Islamic University of Islamabad and IIIT, and was held in Islamabad. He was appointed as the third rector of the International Islamic University, Malaysia, from 1998 to 2011. He actually succeeded Al-Marhum Professor Emeritus Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, who was the second rector of IIUM, and we have just had a conference, an international conference on him, on the occasion of which Professor Marazi is here. Professor Kamal Hassan was the holder of the first Malaysia chair of Islam in Southeast Asia at the Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding at Georgetown University from 1997 to 1999. His academic career and as an administrator began in 1983, ended in 2017. His main research interest was in the issue of Islamicization or Tawhidization of human knowledge. In 2019, Professor Kamal was appointed as the rector of IIU. He was appointed by the current rector, Tan Sri Zulkifli, as the honorary advisor for the Center for Islamization in 2019. And he continued to contribute intellectually, academically towards the betterment of IIUM in fulfilling its vision and mission. His important research publications are presented in 3 volumes on natural science from the worldview of the Quran, and also Voices of Islamic Moderation from the Malay World. Another important book in 2021 was The Concept of Shajatra from an Islamic Perspective. And his latest book, which came out very recently, and it created a lot of discussion, was Corruption and Hypocrisy in Malay Muslim Politics, the Urgency of Moral Ethical Transformation, which was published in 2021. And of more recent 2021 or 2022, he was appointed as the chairman of Institute Kefahaman Islam Malaysia, or IKIM, as an honorary position. So we miss him. He has gone back to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So on this occasion, I request Imam Nazareen to please make dua for the passing away and for the blessing of Professor Kamal Hassan. Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inshallah, we will make a dua, special dua for Al-Marhum Professor Kamal Hassan. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا ولوالدينا وارحمهم كما ربونا صغارا اللهم اغفر لمحمد كمال بن حسن وارحمه وعافه واعف عنه وأكرم نزله ووسع مدخله واغسله بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقه من الخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس وأبدله دارا خيرا من داره وأهلا خيرا من أهله وزوجا خيرا من زوجه وقه فتنة القبر وعذاب النار. O Allah, forgive him, have mercy upon him, give him peace and absolve him, receive him with honor and make his grave spacious, wash him with water, snow and hair, cleanse him from faults, as is plain a white garment from impurity. Equip him with an abode more excellent than his abode, with a family better than his family, and with a maid better than his maid, and save him from the trial of the grave and torment of the hell. اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم من أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفه على الإيمان اللهم لا تحرمنا أجره ولا مضلنا بعده. O Allah, forgive our living and our dead, those who are with us and those who are absent, our young and our old, our men and our women. O Allah, whomever you give life from among us, give him life in Islam, and whomever you take away from us, take him away in faith. O Allah, do not forbid us their reward, and do not send us astray after them. اللهم إنا محمد كمال الحسن في ذمتك وحبل جوارك فقه من فتنة القبر وعذاب النار وأنت أهل الوفاء والحق فاغفر له وارحمه إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم. O Allah, surely Muhammad Kamal bin Hassan is under your protection and in the rope of your security. So save him from the trial of the grave and from the punishment of the fire. You fulfill promises and grant rights. So forgive him and have mercy on him. Surely you are most forgiving, most merciful. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. O our Lord, forgive us and our brothers who preceded us in faith, and put not in our hearts any resentment toward those who have believed. O our Lord, indeed you are kind and merciful. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل اللهم فينا ولا معنا ولا من يتبعنا شقيا ولا مطرودا ولا محروما. اللهم اختم لنا بحسن الخاتمه ولا تختم علينا بسوء الخاتمه. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الآخرة حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. Thank you. And for information, Masjid Darida Istac-Iium, inshallah, will conduct Salat Janazah al-Ghaib for Al-Maqoom Prof. Kamal Hassan right after Zuhur prayer today, inshallah. So all are invited to join us in the Salat Janazah, inshallah.
Amin. Amin. Going with our program today, Professor Abdulaziz Bargut is not able to join us here this morning, but he's following us on Zoom. He is currently now attending the Janazah, the funeral of Professor Tansiri Kamal Hassan in Mangi. Now I pass it over to Dr. Nasrin Nasser. He is the moderator for our program today, which is the 9th lecture in the series of integration of human knowledge and future of civilizational development. So Professor Nasrin, take over.
Thank you very much, Professor Imtiaz Yusuf, for the introduction. Today is a sad day, but unfortunately, we have to continue with the program. today's program, which is about al-Ghazzali. And al-Ghazzali was one of the great scholars in Islam. Before I go to the speaker that we have today and the topic of his speech, please allow me a bit of a leeway in regards to introducing al-Ghazzali, a bit of his timeline. Al-Ghazzali was himself a great scholar of Islam, was born in a village near Tus in northeast of Iran in 1058. He led a very, knowledgeable life in the sense that was always seeking for knowledge. That he moved from his place where he studied in Tus, he moved to Nishapur where he did his studies. And then later on, he was, because of his brilliance, he was taken by his master, Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, who taught him basically theology, Islamic theology. And at the death of Juwayni, al-Ghazali was only probably around 30 years old, was appointed as a replacement for Juwayni, who was a headmaster for the Nizamiya in Baghdad. So he became the headmaster of the Nizamiya College in Baghdad from 1091. But then he was also the scholar in regards to field of theology, regards to field of fiqh, usul fiqh, as well as in regards to he taught himself philosophy whilst he was in Baghdad. The result of which he had managed to produce a lot of books, and most importantly, his books on philosophy, which was very, very important, that he provided a basis for the rebuilding of philosophy even in the Western world. That's why in the Western world, al-Ghazali is known as a philosopher for many, many years because of the book that he wrote, Maqasid al-Falsafa. So, and then he followed that with another book where he wrote on the problems that he had with philosophy. He called it Tahafud al-Falsafa, where he basically criticized the philosophers. And but then he followed that book with another book called al-Ilm, fil Fann al-Mantiq, which is basically about a book on logic. So even though he criticized philosophy, he understood what philosophy is, the Maqasid al-Falsafa. Then he went into the Tahafud, criticized philosophy, but he did not deny the importance of logic or mantiq. The criticism on mantiq was was later on done by another scholar in Islam, Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. But al-Ghazali himself regarded mantiq to be very important, logic to be very important, that he wrote his most important contributions to Usul al-Fiqh, Mustasfa fi Ilm al-Usul, where he describes in the beginning of the book the importance of logic and mantiq in regards to understanding and compilation of argumentation. So Ghazali led this sort of life of scholarly life where he was very well, in a sense of very well versed in the different fields of Islamic thought. So he was versed in theology, in Kalam, as well as Usuluddin, and then he was versed in philosophy, and then he was versed in fiqh, and of course, Usuluddin. But then he experienced a crisis where he disappeared from teaching for 11 years, and he came back after the Vizier Fakhrul Muluk invited him to come back to teach at Baghdad, where he went to Nishapur and he taught there for at least 4 years, where he produced most important contribution of his, I would say, and has influenced a lot of Muslims from there on, the Ihya Ulumuddin. The Ihya Ulumuddin has been, discussed, and it's quite a big volume, around 10-volume book, which he tries to revive religion, where he describes the problem that religion had during his time. And this we are talking about the 11th and the 12th century. and we are talking today, we have the same problems, I would say. And that is why I think the study of Ghazali has attracted a lot of people to do it because of his relevance of what he wrote in the past, because he dealt with universal questions. Now, he passed away in 1111, so that's the end of the chronology. Now is the time for me to introduce our speaker today, which is Professor Dr. Hamidullah Marazi, who is director at the International Center for Spiritual Studies, Islamic University of Science and Technology in Kashmir. He was a former Dean, School of Media Studies, former Dean, School of Social Science, former director, and so many positions. And he has been the professor of Islam and Comparative Religion, and has written so many books about Islam and, most importantly, Islamic philosophy and epistemology. And we are honored to have him here today as our speaker, who's going to speak to us about relevance of Ghazali. And I'm sure you all will get a lot from learning, from listening. I would ask, please, if you have any questions, to please jot it down now and then ask the speaker at the end so that we can have a lively session. Those of you who are on YouTube, you can also send in your questions on YouTube. We'll try and find your questions and ask the speaker later on, as well as those on Zoom can do the same. So I'm not going to take any more of your time, Professor. I'm sorry if you can some time. Yes, introduce Ghazali. The floor is now yours. Bismillah.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة على رسول الكريم أما بعد. First of all, I join my brother Professor Imtiaz Yusuf Saab to condole the death of Professor Kamal Hassan, one of the very important scholars of Islamic world, and he loved Ghazali deeply, and he has also written some articles on Ghazali. Secondly, I am very much thankful to Professor Abdulaziz Bargot for giving me chance to speak to such a learned audience here, and my very old friend from the days of Aligarh, Professor Imtiaz Yusuf Saab. I could meet him after a long time. And then Professor Dr. Muhammad Nasiruddin Nasir, and our friends from different parts of the world, as well as the teachers and the online audience. I welcome you all. So I will be just trying to talk about Ghazali in the context of his philosophy. As Dr. Nasiruddin has already made my job very easy. So he has already introduced Ghazali. I do need to deal with the details of his life and his works, but I will just deal with his thought. And Ghazali had been the topic of my doctorate at Kashmir University and JNU and Aligarh University. And Ghazali never left me, and I never left him as well, because I found him one of the profound scholars of all times to come, not only of Muslims, but of the world. Now, the problem with us was that we could not present his philosophy in such a way which could make him internationally known, and some works could be done on him in the West, although people have on their own work on Ghazali. And non-Muslims have written many books. A Jewish lady, Lazarus Hawa, she has written a detailed book about 600 pages on the life of al-Ghazali. And then Montgomery Watt, a Muslim intellectual, he has written a book on the Ghazali as Muslim intellectual. And then MacDonald, and then Indian scholars like Ram Mohan Rai. He has written on Ghazali in his book, Historical Rule of Islam. And then Iranian scholars like Jalal Humayi and Zareen Kope, they have written very important books on Ghazali in Persian, Ghazali Nama and Farar's Madrasa. And there are many books which have been written on Ghazali by the German scholars and French scholars. More than 3,000 books have been written so far on Ghazali, both by Muslims and non-Muslims. But mostly, Western people were interested more in his philosophy, as was said by Nasruddin as well. But in the East, as Shubli Namani has said, she has complained that Ghazali is known in the East because of his theology, but in the West, because of his philosophy. So that's a very important point, because after Ghazali, some people just label Ghazali that he was responsible for the decline of philosophy in the Islamic world. And after him, we don't find philosophers, but that is a wrong notion. I have proven it that after Ghazali, many philosophers came, and even Sufi philosophers came before, and they brought a new dimension to philosophy. And the impact of Ghazali was everywhere very much profound and vibrant on all those philosophers. We could not deal without Ghazali with any problem. Even Ibn Taymiyyah had written Ar-Rad al-Mantaqin, he had to refer to Ghazali again and again. So when you refer someone, it means that he has some importance and you can't ignore. And my new book is coming, Muslim Philosophy Before and After Ghazali. So we have to refer philosophy to Ghazali back, before and after. So this shows the importance of the person, because my background was in philosophy and I have worked on Western philosophers mostly, Bertrand Russell, Descartes, David Hume, Pascal, Aquinas. So I could compare Ghazali's thought with the Western philosophers. So that made me to understand the importance of epistemology of al-Ghazali. So far as the issues which have been raised by many people about Ghazali is concerned, some people have said that Ghazali was against philosophy. And they said that he attempted to destroy philosophy. It has been said by scholars. So it could not become an affront to the teaching of Islam. If Ghazali is considered to be important figure in determining that faith, not science or reason, would be the defining factor of Arab Islamic life, then Averroes is his counterpart, and he is cited frequently as an early advocate of enlightenment. So this is view which has been presented by some scholars about Ghazali. So, and they say Ibn Rushd was for science, Ghazali was against science and philosophy and thought. And then they say if Averroes represents the beginning of what might have been an Arab enlightenment, as is often suggested, then Ghazali represents its failure. And I had a very tough time, I should say good and tough time, with convincing many scholars that Ghazali has never opposed science or philosophy or logic or thought at all. And he is not responsible for the decline of Muslim thought or science in Islamic world. There were different reasons. One was the sack of Baghdad. Second was the closure of the gate of Ijtihad, which had happened before Ghazali, not after Ghazali. But Ghazali gave a new dimension and new life to Islamic thought and philosophy also in Islam. And he was the first person who, mixed philosophy with the theology and philosophy with the Sufism. And after him, philosophical Sufism emerged. Before that, it was not there. And the philosophers had reluctance to study theology, and theologians had reluctance to study philosophy. He, bridged the gap between the two. And he has been linked for this reason by Ibn Taymiyyah, that he was the person who mixed ilm al-kalam with theology first time. So this is interesting. So Ghazali often considered to be one of the most influential figures in the history of Islam. So this is interesting. He played a key role in setting the Arab Islamic world firmly on their faith, as I said already. The nascent Neoplatonic science and the philosophy that was developing, based on Hellenistic philosophy, never recovered from the death blow dealt to it by Ghazali. These are the alleged new books are coming on the subject. I am quoting from different books. There is no time, otherwise I would have gone in detail. And in this way, we can see how Ghazali is being projected. And then we have people like Ernest Renan. He describes Ghazali as an enemy of philosophy. And we want to know the challenges before we present our scholarly before the world. And we know what people say about him. What we said is not that important. Because we have to introduce Ghazali in the world academia as one of the most profound scholars and representatives of Islamic thought, and who believe in the balanced approach. And he is culturally very relevant to Islam, culturally very relevant, not only ideologically. That's a very important point, because there are scholars who are very much relevant to us from ideological point of view, but from the cultural point of view, because there is diversification in the Islamic world. But Ghazali is trying to cater the needs of all our such type of ethnicities and cultures and regions. That is one of the important aspects of Ghazali, because his erudition was very vast. He did not study philosophy only for 2 years. He pondered on philosophy, then he wrote books on philosophy, Maqal al-Philosopher. And then is Tahawut al-Philosopher, as was mentioned by Brother Nasri. And then Miyam Ilm, Final Maktab, this, fiqh, Usul al-Mustasfa fi Usul al-Fiqh, one of the very profound books on jurisprudence and the regulations and principles of jurisprudence. And al-Muddin, one of the best books. People have said that if all the knowledge vanishes from the world, Ihya is there, we can reconstruct knowledge again based on that. And when we study al-Ulum, we come to know about different worlds of knowledge, realms of knowledge. See, who is a great man is writing a book who is already well versed in different shades of thought, not only of Muslims, but non-Muslims also. He has talked about Christianity, and it is for that reason that Montgomery Ward says, Christians could not find a sympathetic guide like Ghazali in modern times. So he is being al-Fazl ma shahida bil-ada. So he is being acknowledged by people like Montgomery Ward. Otherwise, Montgomery Ward is a little bit inimical to Islamic history. Muhammad al-Makkah and Muhammad al-Medina, you might have gone through his books. And formative period of Islamic philosophy, so Islamic thought. So, but here he praises Ghazali. And as I mentioned, Hawa Lazarus, she spent whole half her life studying Ghazali. She's a Jewish scholar from Beirut University. And she has written a very interesting book on Ghazali, and other people are also. So for Ignace Goldziher, by the time of al-Ghazali, the practice of philosophy in the heartlands of Islam had already weakened. So much that the critique in the incoherence was a mere of the grace to an already ailing tradition. After al-Ghazali, Goldziher continues, quote, we find their philosophical works every now and then on the pen. So, unquote. Goldziher was, of course, the most influential teacher in the formative period of Islamic studies, as we know, in the West, and numerous statements of similar kind appear there during the 20th century. These comments still represent a good part of the more popular understanding of al-Ghazali's position, because they first create a narrative about our scholars, then they perpetuate that. They practice they continuously, and then they make image of our scholars in such a way that even Muslims start thinking negatively about their own past and their legacy. Because we are not working on such subjects. Problem is that we are allowing others to represent us, as has been said by Edward Said in his book Orientalism. So we allow them to represent us, although they have every right to represent us, but they should not misrepresent us. There's a problem. So great scholars of the world who have otherwise done good work, but sometimes about Ghazali they have problem. So I was talking about William M. Watt, so who shaped the historiography of Islamic thought for a whole generation of scholars studying Islam, acknowledged it. So this is interesting. In 1962, that al-Ghazali had brought together philosophy and theology. So he acknowledges. So there are both type of scholars, because why I quote Western scholars? because they are interested in these subjects too. And secondly, they have a say, and they have just presented agenda before the world thought, and people are seeing from the prism of their teachings and writings about our past and other scholars of other denominations. That's very important, and there's nothing wrong in that, because it is their sway nowadays in academics. No doubt we have to accept this. And Ghazali was not against this. He acknowledges the contribution of even Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, although he denounces them. But he says, first we should master what Ibn Sina says and what Al-Farabi represents from the philosophy of the Greeks. And unless and until we master their philosophy, we should not say anything about that. We should become more knowledgeable about their philosophy than they are, Ghazali says. And Muqaddimah, Baqa's philosopher, he says this. So that was a very important point. In modern times, who is setting the agenda for academics? That is mostly Western scholars and even Islamic studies, oraclists. And we need to understand what they say so that we are able to come out with new writings and theses where we can confront some of the issues which they have raised and try to judge the things, because we have one advantage. We can go to the primary sources. And being culturally oriented to the Ghazalian culture, it is very easy for us to defend him. And we need to defend him because his defense is needed so that a moderate approach to Islam and Islamic world is being constructed by the world. A lot of problems we are facing nowadays. And Ghazalian approach can help us in many ways. He can become the middle path for us. And he can relate us to the West and East. And he is acceptable to both. That's the problem. He has been not considered as someone extremist. And I know there was one conference which was organized by Istac long back during the time of Laqib al-Atas. So there was one program on Ghazali, and I was also invited for that. So there were two paradigms he had mentioned. One was the Ghazalian paradigm, and second was the Ibn Taymiyyah paradigm. He had mentioned about that. But here I will not deal with that. We can have questions about that. So this is needed in this way. Ghazali had, as according to what? He limited this fusion to al-Ghazali's introduction of syllogistic logic into the Muslim theological discourse. And he said Ghazali argued powerfully against philosophy. He says, but this, although he brought logic to Islamic theology, but he powerfully speaks against philosophers. And after this, there was no further philosopher of note in the Eastern Islamic world. This is a point which we need to think about and consider seriously. And then there are other scholars also, as I have mentioned some of them, that he attempted to destroy philosophy. And like this, Ghazali often considered to be one of the, as I mentioned already. So this is one point. But there are other people who have talked about Ghazali. For example, Henry Corbin. He regards Ghazali as one of the spiritual personalities of Islam, but he denies to Ghazali any philosophical status. Why I say philosophy? I am not advocating philosophy, but philosophy meant many things during the time of Ghazali. It was considered to be the mother of all sciences, queen of all sciences. It was not like our times, as has been said by Stephen Hawking. Once upon a time, philosophy used to discuss problems of life and death, origin of universe. Now it talks what is language, what can come down, he says. But during the time of Ghazali, philosophy was encompassing whole spectrum of knowledge: physics, metaphysics, mathematics, politics, poetics, botica, and also political science, and also ethics, and also epistemology. And Ghazali has classified philosophy into 6 divisions. And he says there is physics, there is metaphysics, tabiyat, ma'badu tabiyat, and then ethics, then mathematics, and then politics, and such other type of subjects he has included in philosophy. And before him, in Ahsa al-Ulum, Arabi had also talked about various type of classifications of sciences. Then afterwards, we find other scholars. Ibn Khaldun has also talked about different sciences. So when we talk about philosophy was not just something news from nowhere, as nowadays after the logical positivists, they said philosophy is news from nowhere. It was not like that. So when we deny Ghazali the status of being philosophically oriented, we deny that he was against science, he was against mathematics. And people have said it. And then people have also talked about this, that he was against mathematics. He was supporting rationality. And there are people like Jabri, a very famous scholar, Arab scholar. For Jabri, Ibn Sina adopted the academic philosophy, and Ghazali tried to reconcile Bayan with Irfan. Bayan with Irfan. And by doing so, Jabri asserts both men played major roles in the rise of rationality in the Arab Islamic sphere, although in Jabri's eyes, Ibn Sina's influence in this respect was greater even than Ghazali. Jabri claims that Ibn Sina's philosophy and his attack on Greek philosophy represents a growing national Persian consciousness. See, sometimes we are giving the ethnic or racial connotations to these discussions. Very, very unfortunate. And Jabri maintains just as the spirits of Hume and Locke are still present in the minds of the British and the Descartes in the minds of the French, Averroes' spirit should be present in the minds of the Arab instead of that of Avicenna or Ghazali. So now they want to replace Ghazali by Ibn Sina, by Averroes. Although I love Averroes also, because that's our legacy. Philosophy. We can't deny our legacy, but we have to do justice. We know that Ibn Rushd wrote a book that was Fasl Maqal Fima Bain al-Shariat wal Hikmat min Itsa. And Alhamdulillah, I have translated that into English and Urdu also, that is available online. The attitude of Islam toward science and philosophy. And I have shown in my thesis that it was Imam Ghazali who presented agenda for the works of Ibn Rushd. And I have shown the points of difference and similarity between these two philosophers. This one complete. Is there concord or conflict between Ghazali and Ibn Rushd? They were not at poles apart, although there are differences here and there, and I have mentioned also those differences. But to say that it was only Ibn Rushd who can be considered as the symbol of enlightenment for the Islamic world, as Descartes for the French and Locke and Hume for the Britishers can be considered. This is too much. And more reason he defined it with reference to, they say, to divine noetic roots. For example, one scholar, Emir Ali, Professor Imtiaz Yusuf Sahib will be well knowing about him, well informed, because he was very famous in Aligarh. He has written on the Spirit of Islam and other books. So he says, rationalism was fighting a losing battle of its old enemy, the writings of Imam Ghazali. You see, it is too much, which were directed chiefly against the study of philosophy. And I said it was not that philosophy which we study nowadays. Had he done that against our philosophy, I had no problem. But I know when we deny philosophy and we say Ghazali destroyed it, it means he destroyed science. Nozbillah. I say Nozbillah because I know what I say. And I will talk about that, inshallah. And then though other people have said the seventh saw mathematics and logic as inherently useful, and even believed that these sciences did not contradict religious teachings, he still wound up traveling the same path that intolerant theologians had traveled centuries before him. This is the saying of a scholar of Iran, whose name is Zibullah Safa. He has talked about that. As the saying goes, says Safa, Ghazali managed to smother himself with a silk pillow, first tolerating the natural sciences, even praising some, and then by degrees anathematizing them. And this is one view. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson is an American aerophysicist, author, and science commentator. He proclaimed in his public lecture how religious fundamentalism, these are very loaded terms, and you know it better, is the root of the collapse of the Islamic golden age of science and mathematics in Baghdad, that, quote, al-Ghazali, out of his work you get the philosophy that mathematics is the work of the devil. And nothing good can come out of this philosophy, unquote. It is Neil deGrasse Tyson, Intellectual Collapse of Islam. So they considered that Ghazali was responsible for the intellectual collapse of Islam. He was against reason, and he was against mathematics, he was against science. So we have to face these challenges. That's very important for us to understand how we can present our own scholars for the world. And a lot of injustice is being done to our scholars, and we are not there. We are being represented. That's my point. And Istac and IIIT, it is our responsibility. Let us represent ourselves and our scholars, our legacy. Because if we do represent that, then people are free to say anything about us, our past, our religion, everything. And that is very much dangerous, philosophically speaking. Far away, there's a scholar whose name is Pines. He says, there was now there are scholars who support Ghazali from the West. Because we need advocates. Sometimes we need advocates who are very much competent to defend ourselves. Because we are not able to advocate ourselves. That's the problem. In Pine's view, there was no decline of the rational sciences and philosophy after Al-Ghazzali. And there was no lack of new ideas under Islam, Pines wrote, although that tendency to maintain old systems of thought and stability of the scientific environment led to a more gradual development of ideas than in Europe, where fundamental conceptions were periodically revised and sometimes discarded. Science in Islam included a large number of elements of diverse origin. This is very interesting. Pines maintains that, and it integrated Oriental, Persian, Indian, and Greek influences. We have ignored this aspect. How much Muslims have integrated from Indian thought, Chinese thought, apart from Greek thought. We're always saying that it was only the Greek thought, where from Muslims have taken different areas, and they have translated their books and their theories. But we have ignored other aspects, and that has created problems with these nations, and we have no dialogue. We have deadlock with Asian communities. We may have some dialogue with Christians and Jews, but we have no dialogue with Hindus, Buddhists, Chinese. There is a lot of deadlock going on. So, but as has been said by Pines, that Muslims have taken many things from Oriental, Persian, Indian, and Greek cultures. And he quotes, he says, in its further development, it did not, as a rule, eliminate one of them. They were not selective, as West was. They just take thoughts of Muslims which pertain to Greek, Hellenistic thought, but what was Islamic in that, they have discarded. But Muslims have taken everything from these all other cultures. This is an interesting subject which I have mentioned. It led them to subsist side by side or on different plans. So Islamic thought continued with those thoughts, with that heritage, which they have taken from other communities as well, not only from Greeks. In Islam, there was, he says, there was a trend towards syncretism in which elements of Kalam, Falsafa, and Sufism would appear within one and the same thinker. And it is uncommon in the Western context. And I find only Bertrand Russell and only few scholars of the West who have written on all the subjects. Otherwise, they are just specialized in one subject only. But in our part of the world, Ghazali, being an epistemologist, he was also writing on ethics, moral education. He is educationist as well. And he has written on psychology. I will just discuss some of the aspects of his psychology. That is very much, that is not well known. And he has given some insights which were later on taken by Adler and Freud and others, although they have not mentioned it. He influenced Descartes. Although people don't accept this, there's a problem because we have not projected in that way. Although Hussein Nasr in his new book, History of Islamic Philosophy in Islam, he has shown even the connection between Descartes and Ghazali. And there are other people also, and Imam Sharif in his book, History of Islam, Muslim Philosophy, he has also tried to show the circumstantial evidences where from Ghazali impacted Descartes. And I have shown in my book from the books of both the writers like Descartes and Ghazali, how similar are the views, and it seems that is the English or French version of Ghazali's Al-Munqiz min al-Dalal. But meditation on first philosophy, Descartes says, or method de la, the discourse de la method, Descartes says. So views are so similar, only it seems the translation of what Ghazali has said in Munqiz. That's interesting. And we need to explore that more. So in this way, and then there is in 74, Alessandro Bassani added an interesting observation. So this is interesting. While in the medieval West, the mainstream of scientific discourse, the scientific orthodoxy, so to speak, was dominated by a systematic Aristotelian approach and the progressive trends. That is the scientific heterodoxy, were often radical anti-Aristotelianism in Islam. These roles were reversed. Here, the orthodoxy included various strands of anti-Aristotelianism, and it developed a flexible and syncretic approach to the methods of science. This is very important. The much more static situation in the West was, Boston adds paradoxically, one of the reasons for its progress, since it was forced to change the approaches and the methods of science radically. He quotes, it is much more difficult to be radically revolutionary if one is confronted by a comparatively more progressive establishment, unquote. And then we have some other scholars who have talked about that. Alhamdulillah, in Arab world, people are talking about Ghazali. And there was Maharjan al-Ghazali, and good scholars, Abdurrahman Badawi and Umar Farooq and others, they have talked about Ghazali. And they have tried to bring some new dimensions of Ghazali's thought to fore, which are philosophically oriented and which have relation with science, his views on science. That's very important. Otherwise, as I said, mostly people are dealing with his theology or his tasawwuf, because his multi-dimensional personality is being ignored sometimes. And Ghazali was writing, and he says, "Irif al-haq fa'rif ahla." And then he made a principle, Marifatul Rijal bil Haq should be there, not Marifatul Haq bil Rijal. And this is a universal principle that we should not make personalities this, sources or paradigm of truth. Truth should be made the paradigm of personalities. We can judge people by truth, not truth by people. And this is one of the greatest statements he has made. And then he make a second statement, Al-Manidatu aslu da'in la dawalaha. The animosity is the root of the disease, which has no remedy. How to remove that animosity from the minds of people by your actions and precepts? That was very important, but Muslims have tried to do something with that. And in this way, the discipline of Kalam, that is Muslim rational theology, as it had been developed by the Mu'tazilites and continued by Sunni and Shia schools of thought, most prominently the Ash'arites, offered a new home to philosophy. So philosophy was there, and it continued in India. I have written a detailed article, Medieval Rational Thought in India, and that was published by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, in their book volume. What was the medieval philosophical contribution of Muslims during the Mughals and the Sultanate period? So this philosophy continued there. Mullah Muhammad Junpuri, he was one of the great scholars. And books like Buzudi, and then we had Mullah Sadra and Shamsul Baziga. These were written in Indian context. And they have discussed the problems of philosophy and logic and science and metaphysics and ethics. So this continued. So it did not discontinue because of Ghazali, as has been said by many people. So it has been mentioned by other scholars. The discourse of Islamic theology integrated the tradition of falsafa. So much so that Muslim theologians such as Fakhruddin Razi, Nasiruddin Tosi, and many other scholars of this period must be considered philosophers as well as theologians. So they also continued this trend. So this allegation is not right that philosophy died because of Ghazali. Although there was some setback to philosophy because of other reasons, but the philosophy which emerged after Ghazali, that included something more than earlier philosophy included. It was enriched rather, as has been said by Hussein Nasr. He says, Ghazali Falsuf mani to falsafa. He is the philosophical opponent of philosophy. Interesting. He is opponent of philosophy, but philosophical. And philosophy is just thesis, antithesis, synthesis. All the, and it has been, Eric Fromm says that what is the important aspect, salient feature of new philosophy? A philosopher takes idea from another philosopher, earlier philosopher, and builds on that and makes a new philosophy. And that has happened always in the history of philosophy. But when it comes Ghazali, we say, no, he was not supporting philosophy. He is supported because philosophy never kills philosophy. Thought never kills thought. It gives new response to thought, rather. And philosophy, as has been said by Al-Kindi, Yaqub Al-Kindi, that if theologians are opposing philosophy, they have to come out with arguments, rational arguments. And that means philosophy. How they can oppose philosophy without philosophy? Al-Kindi says. So we have made philosophy something which is totally different. No, philosophy means to think out of box, think critically, and use a methodology of logic. Logic is very important in philosophy. Although Ibn Taymiyyah has rejected that logic, and he has given so many arguments against that, he has his own reasons for that. Because I have written a book on Ibn Taymiyyah also, that is Intellectual Legacy of Ibn Taymiyyah. There I have shown why he has opposed Greek philosophy and Greek logic especially. Ghazali had supported Greek logic. He said, for doing fiqh, we have no way out than to resort to logic. Al-Mustasfa, Usul Fiqh, he has talked about that. In the prelude of that book, he says, if you want to deal with the fiqh, that is jurisprudence, without knowledge of logic, you can't do justice. And there will be no saqah in that argument. But Ibn Taymiyyah says, we don't need philosophy. In his Ar-Rad al-Mantaqin, he has his own reasons. As I said, we own all our past scholars. They are great. We are because of them. They are not because of us. And as has been said by Ram Lando, and if anyone just talks about Ibn Sina in modern terminology, Al-Farabi, to some person, maybe from some Arab or some Indian, these were your philosophers, these were your scientists, we will say, wrong number, sir. They are not our philosophers. Because they were speaking in the terms of their times. They were ahead of their times. And you will be astonished to know, outside the University of Barcelona, there is the idol of Averroes. And outside the University of Naples, there are the idols and statues of Ibn Sina and Ibn Razi, Al-Razi. Because West considers them as their benefactors. But Muslims have disowned them. As Iqbal says, Vini Rose Pire Kanara Tamasha Kun. Vini Rose Sia Pire Kanara Tamasha Kun. Ki Nure Didash Roshan Ki Nure Cheshme Didash Roshan Kuda Cheshme Zulekhara. Oh, Gani Kashmiri, see the tradition of the Yaqub al-Islam. His light of eyes is enlightening Zulekha, but Yaqub has himself lost the sight because of in the grief of his son. Same is the case. Our knowledge, our books are creating enlightenment in the West, but we have become ourselves backward. Iqbal says this. So this is very important point. We have to understand this. In this way, there was Fakhruddin Razi, there was Nasiruddin Tusi, there was Iqbal, there was Ibn Khaldun after Ghazali, and there was Ibn Taymiyyah. I have shown that Ibn Taymiyyah was also so much consistent in his argument against philosophers, and he has brought philosophical arguments against philosophers and logic. And to denounce logic was not a small thing. Even Ghazali had not denounced, and Ibn Taymiyyah was a man, Ar-Rad al-Mantaqin. It was John Stuart Mill who first time talked about criticism. He wrote books on criticism of logic, but that was done before by Ibn Taymiyyah. And that was also philosophical, contribution of Ibn Taymiyyah in a sense. And we should not take it in a very, very, I should say, loose sense or limited sense, in that sense. So Ghazali helped. Now, what is important, as has been mentioned by me, now people have studied the books of Ghazali, and they say Ghazali rather naturalized philosophy, which was not accepted by the theologians before Ghazali. Ibn Salah and Ahmad bin Hanbal, they had given fatwa against philosophy. But it was Ghazali who naturalized philosophy. He gave philosophy a room in Islamic studies and Islam. And most notably those of Ibn Sina. His books were just, as has been said, Ghazali was diseased by Kitabu Shifa, Ibn Sina. Ghazali was diseased by Kitabu Shifa, Ibn Sina. And Ghazali went into the womb of philosophy, wanted to come out, couldn't. So when he wrote about philosophy, he just popularized the ideas of Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi. And that by implication was the philosophy of Greeks. So how he was responsible for decline of philosophy rather, and his book was considered as the textbook of the Jews of the Middle Times, and his book, that is Maqais al-Philosopher, was considered to be the metaphysics of al-Ghazali. That was read as a textbook by the Jews. There's mentioned by many people. So this is interesting. Given that he criticized 20 teachings of the philosopher in his Incoherence of the Philosophers, and even condemned 3 of them as apostates from Islam, must we say that the nationalization and effective integration of the philosophy and discourse of Islam happened despite al-Ghazali? Or rather, should we think of al-Ghazali as a thinker who stands at the center of the developments in Islamic theology, and whose Incoherence and subsequent works on Islamic theology are in fact a vital part of this process? He set a process in motion, and people started thinking, and no one could ignore Ghazali after him. So he set the agenda for people like Ibn Rushd, Ibn Tufair, Ibn Baja, Ibn Miskawayh, and they have related to him. And Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun has taken almost the whole classification of knowledge which has been presented by Imam Ghazali. I have made some comparisons somewhere else, but there is no time to discuss about that. And he nationalized philosophy in that way. Al-Ghazali tirelessly stresses the merits of syllogistic logic, and urges his peers in Islamic theology to adopt this rational technique. He says that Muslims should adopt this rational technique. He was quite outspoken about this project and propagates it. For instance, in his autobiography, that is Al-Munqidh al-Dalal, as well as in Incoherence, and his this aspect of al-Ghazali's relationship to falsafa is well known. Some critics and interpreters of Ghazali have questioned how he could make use of Aristotelian logic without also adopting Aristotelian ontology. Now we have to make difference between ontology, logic, metaphysics. So when Ghazali sets his agenda, he says, I have no problem with physics. I have no problem with mathematics. And rather, a person who opposes mathematics, he is bringing blame to Islam. Whatever has been already proved by science, why we should oppose it? And we have nothing to do with metaphysics of these people. That has been proved. And nothing we have to do with their ethics also, because they have taken ethics from the Sufis of Islam. And we have no problem also with their politics. They have taken it from the prophets. So he relates. He says that Kalimatul Hikmah Dawlatul Mu'min. They have taken many things from prophets. They have taken many things from Sufis. Let us relate. That was a very important point, to reconcile rather than to separate yourself, segregate yourself. This was the Ghazalian, approach. If there is something good with them, why not to accept that? Why to denounce everything? And he says a person is a worse enemy of Islam who opposes mathematics or physics. And then people will say there is no scope for mathematics and science in Islam. And he is the enemy of Islam who says this, that there is no relation between mathematics and then he quotes the hadith of the Prophet when on the day when Hazrat Ibrahim, son of Prophet, he expired, and there was the solar eclipse. And people started saying that it is because of the death of the Prophet's son. Prophet said, no, sun and moon are the sons of Allah. These have nothing to do with anyone's death or birth. And this has been quoted by Professor Abdul Salam, who is a Nobel laureate from Pakistan. And he says, see the Islamic approach to science. Islam does not denounce science or mathematics. And he quotes Ghazali there. He was Nobel laureate himself. So you can understand that this is a very important point. Ghazali understood this connection very well. And while propagating learning logic from the philosopher, he knew that he was also asking his peers to subscribe to fundamental assumptions that would change their positions on ontology and metaphysics. So that is possible if there is nothing wrong in accepting anything. What is wrong in that? I do think Ghazali has supported that. We can take this thing from them because they are taking it from prophets or the Sufis, some of the views. And if anything has been proven by science, he says, how I can oppose reason when Allah has praised it? He says, the example of reason is like eye, the example of Sharia is like sun. If we don't have eye, how we can have the vision of sun? Simple terms. And people say he was against reason. His every, and then in his Ahl al-Umuddin, what are the maqas, the Sharia? He has explained, although separately he has explained, but in Ahl al-Umuddin, which set the agenda for Shahullah Dahlevi in his Hujjatullah Baligha, and I have made comparison between Ghazali and Shahullah Dahlevi also, how he set the agenda for Shahullah Dahlevi in his Hujjatullah Baligha. There is a reason, there is a wisdom behind every commandment of Allah and Sharia. And this was a very important point which Ghazali has raised in his book, Ahl al-Umuddin. And see how he is showing the wisdom behind every worship, every belief of Islam, every practice of Islam. So, and in this way, we can find that even the aforementioned condemnation of three philosophical teachings in the incoherence of the philosopher was actually a part of the naturalization of Aristotelian philosophy into Islamic theology. When you are talking to someone, you are owning someone. Otherwise, you will not talk. Nowadays, we are not talking. We are not in dialogue. We are in deadlock. We are not going to other people of the world and talk to them, see what they say, what they think, how they think about us. And I have seen in many seminars, international conferences, where people were discussing Islam, but Muslims were not present. They were discussing us, and we were not present. And Ghazali has tried to reach out to people. That was great. Through his thought, through his understanding, through his dialogue. And he owned whatever was good there. So people thought that he also talks about us. He does not talk us about himself always. That's very important. Unless and until we relate with the thoughts, and Ghazali related. He understood philosophy of Greeks better than the Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi. And his book was considered one of the textbooks for the Jews during Middle Time. So this is a very important point. And then given that he criticized the 20 teachings of the philosopher incoherence, so this was the effective integration of the philosophical discourse Islamic that happened. For example, Frank Giffel, very interesting his statement he has made. Quote, in this book, I will explain why al-Ghazali is indeed the first Muslim theologian who actively promotes the naturalization of the philosophical tradition into Islamic theology. His workers document an attempt to integrate Aristotelian logic into the tradition of Kalam or of rationalist Islamic theology. Al-Ghazali tirelessly stresses the merits of syllogistic logic and urges his peers in Islamic theology to adopt the rational technique. He was quite outspoken about this project and propagates it, for instance, in his autobiography, as I said. Some critics and interpreters of Ghazali have questioned how he could make use of Aristotelian logic, as I mentioned, but it has been replied by scholars like Frank. Yet, a thorough study of Ghazali's works on theology leaves no doubt that his views on ontology, the human soul, and prophecy are particularly shaped by Avicenna. As it has been said about Ibn Arabi and Sheikh Ahmad Sarandi. Professor Imtiaz knows about that. Sheikh Ahmad Sarandi and Ibn Arabi. People say that Sheikh Ahmad Sarandi has opposed Ibn Arabi. But Shahullah Ghani says that he has combined both. Wahatul Wujud and Wahatul Shuhud. Because he said at the level of my experience, ecstatic, I found that Wahatul Wujud is one stage of, Sufism. It is not the last. But according to Ibn Arabi, it is the last stage. But he does not deny that it is not stage. So then he has gone to understand Abadiyya, Ziliyya. So here, this is not the topic, because I am interested in all these subjects. So I found that same is the case with Ghazali. So Ghazali presented the agenda for other philosophers. When he studied philosophy, he was taking arguments from the philosophers, but his way was, he was not replying arguments with Quranic verses or hadiths. He was bringing other arguments, counter arguments to their arguments. Especially in Tahafut philosopher, he does not present Islamic arguments. He presents rational arguments against the rational arguments of the philosophers. उसको हम उर्दू में कहते हैं मियाँ की जूती मियाँ के सर. To pay in the same coin. What philosophers were saying, he was giving replies in the same language, and that pressured their thought. And according to Shubli, philosophers were not able to object to Islam after Ghazali for 100 years. And had not Ibn Rushd come to the rescue of philosophy, philosophers would have never replied to the questions of Islam. So this is important. So in this way, there are many such type of, I will just try to, because time is there and I would like to have your questions also later on. Furthermore, even the aforementioned condemnation of the philosopher teachings like that. So this was in that sense not condemnation of philosophy as total. And there are some programs and other things which will have said. Ghazali and the Parts Conversation, this is a very good book by Ibrahim Musa. So he has talked about that. Now he says that Ghazali is the household name in the Islamic world, while in some other locations people have only a vague recollection of or memory of him as a renowned scholar or a poet. By his critics, Ghazali is also viewed a formidable but for the harm that he has done. They charge that it was he who sowed the seeds for some of the most intelligible discursive superays in Muslim thought. But he says this is just misinformation. It has nothing to do with that. Now I have given the details from the books of Ghazali, what he says about logic, what he says about mathematics, what he says about science. So what people have said, whether that is right or wrong, I have proven it is wrong. It is fallacious. They have not gone through the books of Ghazali. Otherwise, they would have found that Ghazali was not against logic. And for example, about logic, Ghazali says, at first he found solace in logic and deployed it to advance his theological propositions. Mastering the repertoire of logic as well as of metaphysics and physics clearly furnished his narrative with additional clarity. So he took help from this. And then from science, about science, Shibli Namani has written very important book. And that should be translated in all the languages of the world. One of the best books on Ghazali, I have found, because I have seen books on Ghazali in Persian, Arabic, in Urdu, in Kashmiri, in English. But I have not found a book like al-Ghazzali, which has been written by Shibli Namani. And mashallah, he was a profound scholar of Indian subcontinent. So he says, the opinion of Imam Ghazali about creation of the universe in his distinguished book al-Ghazali, that this universe was created by God according to order, coherence, and harmony as much as possible. And this is the point which has been taken by Ormsey in his book, Ghazali's Controversy on the Best Possible Worlds. So here Ormsey says that Ghazali, being an Asharite, how he can take the portion of the Mu'tazilites? Because according to Mu'tazilites, Allah, God can do only the best. So this world is the best possible world. This is the viewpoint of the Mu'tazilites. But Asharites have different viewpoint. We know that. I am not going into detail. But he says he could take sometimes the portion of Mu'tazilites also. And Ghazali also in Faisal Tafarqa, he says that if I am taking the portion of Mu'tazilites sometimes, what is wrong in that? Because should I take the portion of those people who were before us, so because they were before us, who should take their portion? If people come later on, can't we take their portion? What is wrong in that? So he was, for that reason, he was denounced by some people that he is taking the portion of the Mu'tazilites. So he was not that much, rigid in taking the views of people. He was open to new ideas, as has been said in the Rig Veda, let noble thoughts come from all sides. He was open to noble thoughts. So he took something from, Baklani and others also, they have taken from him. And he has taken some views from Mu'tazilites. He has taken views from, Asharites. And he has taken views from philosophers. He has taken views from even some Christian scholars. That is there, that has been mentioned. And this has causality. For example, some people have just made allegations against Ghazali that he was against cause and effect. Because he says that it is not necessary when there is cause, there should be effect also. But he says, I say cause is not with the effect. And there may be many causes, or there may be one cause, there may be many effects. And this was the theory which he propounded and which was taken on later on by Hume, David Hume. David Hume in his treatise on human nature. He has talked about that. And also Copenhagen interpretation of science, that mechanics. They have also talked about that. I have mentioned about that also. So in fact, Ghazali did not deny causality in general. But the argument which Ghazali directed against the causal doctrine of philosophers is aimed at disproving the necessity of causal relations as claimed by the philosophers. So it is not necessary, but it is there. It may be there or maybe not there, because there were no cause for why Abraham was not burned by the fire. How the water gushed forth from the staff when Moses struck it. So how you can explain that? So he says we can't explain everything through reason. We have limitations. And maybe there are many causes. There may be one cause. And that cause is not known to us. We are not knowing that cause, but it does not mean there is no cause. And as has been said by some scholars, Lehman, he says that there is supernatural cause, not natural cause for many things. And that is the uncertainty principle of Poincaré. That there are certain things which are not certain in the universe. There are leaps and bounds in Copenhagen interpretation. So this is now being proven by human science. We can't find cause for everything. There may be unknown causes also. If we don't find the cause, it does not mean it has no cause. It may have, if not natural cause, it may have supernatural cause. And we don't know many causes because our knowledge is very limited. So Ghazali just showed that they are denying Mojizat, miracles, without any knowledge. And as Hume says, a man went desert, found a watch there. Then he says, where from the watch has come? He says it's a habit. As Hume says, it is because of habit. We find with cause there should be, with effect there should be cause. But not necessarily, it is habit. We always, as Bertrand Russell also, in his book that is Problems of Philosophy, he has mentioned about induction. But it does not mean that it is necessary it will be like that. As it happened today, it may happen to me tomorrow also. Something else may happen. And in many books, our knowledge of external world, human knowledge, scope and limits, Bertrand Russell has talked about that. And many physicists have talked about that. And so in this way, we can find that the Ghazali that emerges offers many surprises. He offers surprises, particularly on his motives for leaving Baghdad, and then his another adoption, that he became a Sufi type of man, ascetic, after having a very great career for 10 years. That's also his sincerity. He was living like a prince. He used to wear the dress of the princes. But all of a sudden, he felt that why I'm doing this. And he writes in al-Mulk ibn al-Zala, perhaps I am facing the threat of burning in the hellfire. Have I done it all for the worldly gains? And that changed his life. His sincerity to knowledge and his faith. Then he left for 10 years, He went sometimes to Damascus, sometimes to Hebron, sometimes Makkah, and like a wandering dervish. And then he just came out with the new personality. And that was the sincerity of Ghazali. We don't find that authenticity and sincerity in other scholars. And he has been, in this way compared to many scholars. And this is a very important point. Basically, Ghazali's thinking was never static. Early in his life, he was influenced by the Ash'arites. In turn, were influenced by Neoplatonic thought. In the middle of life, he dispensed with Aristotelianism and the corpus of Neoplatonic teachings. Later in his life, he became wandering as a mystic, having given up his position as professor in the university set up by Nizam al-Mulk in Baghdad. And then it has been said by Ibn Taymiyyah, the Taruz Aql wa Naql. He says in the last stage of his life, he started studying ahadith. And a famous saying is there, Mat al-Ghazali wa Bukhari ala sadrihi. But it does not mean he was not knowing hadith. He was well versed in hadith, because you can find his al-Ulum full of ahadith. Although Zainuddin Iraqi said, for some ahadith, lam ajad lahu ajad sanada. And also Zahabi has talked about that. But there are hundreds of ahadith which are authentic ahadith. So he was well versed, but he was not, yeah, mashallah. Yeah, mashallah. So he was in this way very much well versed in all, and he studied everything whatever he found is important. Because he was a sincere seeker of truth. Seeker of truth. So this is an important point. And for that reason, his thought was never static. And we need to have people like that. We can change our opinion if we confront truth. As he said, we should not make people as the criteria of truth. Rather, truth should be the criteria of people. So this is a important. And then Pelisos and others have talked about him, and he has just tried to compare him that he has the Christian sentiment, and Islam was Christianized by him and other things. But this is not very important. And then, as I mentioned, Hazaras Yahweh's the most discerning and balanced approach to Ghazali's life, she says, she has talked about. There were several writers who have discussed and brought forth remarkable, similarities between Ghazali, Descartes, Hume, Pascal, and Kant. And I have also done that. Then Iqbal has also talked about Ghazali, and for example, he says, it was, I think, Nazam who first formulated the principle of doubt as a basis of all knowledge, and Ghazali's principle of doubt. But that was not methodological doubt of Descartes. That was existential doubt. I have proven that. Descartes had made methodological doubt in order to doubt philosophy and started anew. But Ghazali's doubt was existential. That was real doubt. And he was really affected by that doubt. And his life was affected. And he left the world for some time. And then there are scholars who have worked on him, like Madhkur have worked, and then Zaki Mubarak, and Isaac Musa Hussaini. I have just taken different type of statements from great scholars of Arab world. And Emin Roy, while quoting Ernest Renan, he says that the father of modern skepticism did not say anything more than what had been said by the Arab philosopher who preceded him by 700 years. Emin Roy says about Ghazali. And this is, and I will end, for example, what he said about mathematics. So finally, I will say that we need to see what people have said about Ghazali, and we should read that. We should not feel shy of knowing what people say about our scholars, about our legacy. And then, as Ghazali did, he studied philosophy. What philosophers say about God, about the 20 matters, and on 17 matters, he considered the philosophers as heretical. But he did not denounce them altogether. On 3 matters, he called them as infidels. That is the resurrection of the soul, bodies, and soul, and the knowledge of particulars and universals, and eternity of the world. These were the 3 problems. And then there are 17 problems on which he said they are heretical. But he gave arguments for that. And he wanted to understand what philosophers say. And we want to understand what people say about Ghazali, if we want to represent him. And then we come out with the arguments, rational arguments, rather than theological arguments. Because we need to have philosophical arguments against philosophical arguments. We have not, as has been said, Hatibul Lal, Ghaisu Sad, as Shawla Delhi has used. And Ghazali, Shawla Delhi says, Hum Rijal, Wahnana Rijal, Wabainana Sijal. They were the people and we are the people. They may be sometimes right, sometimes we may be right. Let us see what they say. Let us not go with the tide. So this is important. And Ghazali was a profound scholar who was an original thinker, original scholar, and his thought was never static. He was open to any new thought, new insight from any side. And before him was, and he had quoted this hadith of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the word of wisdom is the last property of a believer. Wherever he gets it, we should pick it up. And this was governing his life. And he is relevant to modern times. And modern scholars have worked on him. And they are ready to listen to Ghazali. But they are not ready to listen to many of us. So let us make them to listen about Ghazali. And if there are misconceptions, we can, and for the Islamic world, Ghazali is so much relevant. He has been honored by most of the scholars, especially Eastern scholars. He has been not dishonored by many. There are some, but they are very few. West has also owned him in many ways. There are good scholars of the West who have worked on Ghazali, and he can become the bridge for dialogue with the West and the rest, I should say. And among the Muslims, he can also become a bridge because Shafis, Hanafis, Hanabila, everyone is accepting him. And they Malikis, they quote him. Even Shia, they also quote him, and Hussein Nasr and Zabiullah Safa and Zareen Kob and Jalal Humayi. They have written good books on Ghazali, very voluminous books. So he can become a, I should say, meeting ground for us in many ways. But as has been said, but right as the Istac and IIT, our project is not to project persons, project thoughts. And that has been the project of Ghazali also. Marifatul Haq Birijal is not okay, but Marifatul Rijal bil Haq. So let us assess Ghazali and see how much relevant he is. But as in West, as has been said about Shahullah Dahlavi by a scholar, had Shahullah Dahlavi been in the West, he would have become an institution. But in our places, we make personality cults. We do think on that, examine and go ahead. And whatever is good in that, take that ahead with us. And whatever is not relevant, leave it there and make it an institutionalized thought rather than individualized thought. So if we do that, then we can make Ghazali very much relevant. And I have found him very relevant in my research, in my studies, and in my conversations with different universities, conferences, and people were ready to listen what Ghazali's argument was. So with these words, I am very thankful to all of you for your patient hearing. And if you have some questions, I have to say many things, but mashallah, I try to condense that, whatever I have wanted to say. So if you have some questions or observations, you are most welcome. Thanks again to Istac and Professor Abdulaziz Bagot, Professor Imtiaz, Professor Nasri, and all of you, mashallah, who have given me patient hearing. I feel so much privileged. May Allah give you jaza for this. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Professor Marazi, for very, very enlightening talk. There's a lot of things to unpack there. And we are lucky because we have the three ways of asking questions. Those who are here, you're very lucky, you're in front of the speaker. You can ask questions directly, or you need to raise a question. Raise your hand, sorry. Yeah. And I have already 2 questions on Zoom, which has come to me. But I will let Professor Dr. Mehmet to ask the first question. Yes, please go. Yeah.
No, thank you very much for very nice to hear about Ghazali. When I visited some 1.5 decades ago, one of the oldest Malay libraries in this region, I discovered that the many works of Ghazali, somewhere in Aceh, still this library exists centuries old, since 7th century onwards. But this part of Malay work has not known much about poetry. And I think also Ghazali. You mentioned that this is one of his very, he was a dynamic scholar and interact with others. I mean, during that time, Baghdad and this centuries of Islamic civilization, very dynamic, not only just the Islamic tool, but also the other tools. Muslim scholars circles, interacted. That's why he was once that suspicious of something, personal problem in his belief. Then he initiated his wandering to discover the truth. I guess that when we talk about this Islamic thought, we should not be kind of imposing all this time and place. When these scholars live and what they experience and what sort of social relationship they were exposed, and they included Ghazali. So first of all, he was looking for his own emancipation, I guess. Then he initiated to answer the questions to his own questions, and develop his community. I mean, another issue is that why is Islam supposed to be someone or as mentioned by some more people which can find the roles in this Islamic society being stagnated. Is there any relation between his troubles with Sufism in the last part of his life, and he did not act accordingly to all his ideas, but he preferred to be secular instead? Is there a relation between this idea and his own choice?
Yeah, mashallah.
You want to answer now, or
Yeah, it's kind of like,
do you want to wait for the question?
okay, we can just take them together.
Yeah.
Maybe there are some questions
Yeah,
coinciding.
Be easier.
That's good.
Yeah, we covered some questions.
There are more questions?
Yeah, we have 3 more questions actually from Zoom.
Mashallah.
The first one is very straightforward. From Farida, Sister Farida Jamal, what were the possible causes of decline of Islamic civilization? Okay. The second question, another one has come up. Second question is, can we say what happened to al-Ghazali was also the same as happened to Ibn Taymiyyah, who has been misunderstood as anti-logic or rejecting philosophy? This is by Brother Muhammad Asif Sobri. So he basically saying that Ibn Taymiyyah actually accept logic and accept philosophy. Yeah. Okay. So, and the third question, I don't want to read the fourth one. The third question is about Ghazali's concept of causes and cause and effect. This is the core problem in philosophy as well as in modern science, because he says it's clear that Ghazali had rejected causality in philosophical terms because he believes the real cause is depending on God's will. So that's why Averroes or Ibn Rushd opposed against al-Ghazali in Tahaffut at-Tahaffut. This is from Imam Wahyuddin. Thank you very much.
Mashallah.
Yes, please go.
Thank you very much for the very enlightening questions. So far as Fitra is concerned, Ghazali has said that I am also in search of to know what is Fitra. Why a Christian boy is growing as a Christian, why a Jew is growing as a Jew, and why a Magian is growing as a Magian. I want to know what is that Fitra. I am in search of that. So he was very much seeker of that, what is truth. He himself was seeking for the truth. And for that reason, he had to, even undergo a very great time, 10 years, and then he was under the spell of skepticism, type of skepticism, although that was a existential skepticism, that was not methodological skepticism, as some people say something. That's wrong to call it methodological. Although he has talked about in Minhaj al-Abidin, he has talked about skepticism, that without getting, skeptic, you will never get enlightened. He has talked also about that. But so far as his skepticism was concerned, that was existential. That was not methodological in this way, because he believed at least in the 3 principal beliefs of Islam, Tawheed, Risala, and Akhirah, Ma'ad. He never doubted these 3, he has said about that. Otherwise, he had doubted many things. He will go get in al-Munkir Nazala. So in this way, he was really in search of his own peace of mind. First, he wanted to discover what is truth himself. And then he said, who are the claimants of the truth? So these are the theologians, these are the philosophers, these are the Batiniya. Then he says, then these are the people Tasawwuf. He says that I found in Tasawwuf, they are the people of Zawq and not of expression. Then he quotes Ibn Mataz, Kana ma kana mimma last azkuru, Hazain al-khair wala tahsal al-khabar. This is some such experience which you can't explain. That is within you and God. So he was in search of that truth himself. And then he realized it. And his condition was very strange for some time. And his students, Fakhruddin, this Ibn Arabi, he talks about him, that I saw him in the desert, and his condition was very strange. He was having a very, Tatar type of dress he had, and I looked towards him. Is that Pushal good or this Pushal good, which you have once at Baghdad, Nizamiya? So this is because he was in search of that. This is very important point. So when he reached to this truth, then he tried to explain to others, and we can find al-Ulum and other books. And so far as stagnation of philosophy is concerned, I do believe that philosophy has ever become stagnant in the Islamic world. Philosophy was being taken care by a group of people, not by all the theologians. During the time of Ghazali, during the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, during the time of Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, All people were not philosophers. There were theologians, students of Quran, Hadith, Sunnah, Muhaddisi. They were coexisting. So philosophy can't be taken by all. It's not a cup of tea of every person, and every person should not take it up. That's good. It's very difficult sometimes. If everyone will be philosopher, what will happen to the nation? Because philosophy, it is as has been said by Ghazali. There are, Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati hasana. There are some people who are people of Burhan. They can be addressed only with the logic and reason. And there are ahlul maw'izati, who we can to sermonize in a simple terms. And then he says, if we feed a boy or a child with the flesh of birds, it will make him problematic for him. So we have to takallim an-nas ala qadri uqulihim. And he quotes as Ali. So in this way, he says that there are different type of people. Every person can't be addressed with one voice. And that point has been taken by Ibn Rushd by him, after him. First is Ahlul Burhan, Ahlul Tasdeeq, Ahlul Safsata, and Ahlul Mujadala. So there are varieties of people. So philosophy continued. But there was a new flavor of philosophy. Now there was spirituality also. There was kalam also. There was maqasid also, fiqh. And fiqh also, then we have great people, then they wrote books on fiqh. And they used to take help from logic and philosophy in fiqh, which was not very much prevalent before Ghazali. So further he has been alleged by people like Ibn Taymiyyah that he mixed philosophy with ilm al-kalam and deen and diniyat and theology. So in this way, it did not decline. And I said that in the other parts of Islamic world, like India, like Turkey, and like some I should say Central Asian countries, philosophy continued in its own way, and there it was being taught in the colleges, universities, and madrasas, and still it was continuing in our madrasas. So we could say that he made philosophy to decline, but the problem was people became, because of the attack of these Mongolites. Muslims had to preserve their own religion first. Then they could think about the luxury of philosophical thought. So that has happened. But it was not because of Ghazali. And still philosophy did not die. And I have written a complete article on the subject, rational thought in the medieval India. And such great philosophers emerged in India. And Jaunpur became like the Shiraz of India, Shiraz. And in Iran, philosophy flourished. And then Ibn Arabi, he presented philosophical Sufism. Then Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi, he rebutted with philosophical arguments. And then we have Hamidullah Dalwi. He is so well versed with philosophical arguments, al-Misal, and he talks about all those words which have been talked about philosophers earlier. So in this way, this is. Now, there was it could need some more reply, but because of the time, Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah. So you're right. The question is very right, that both of these are the victims. People have victimized these, and we are being victimized everywhere, and we are being represented, misrepresented, and our legacy is being misrepresented because we are not in the field. I always quote Edward Said, we are being represented. We don't represent ourselves. That's the problem. So we could present Ghazali in a better way. We could present Ibn Taymiyyah in a better way, and both are respectable to us. They were mujtahids. They were great people, mujahids of their times. We will not agree with every thought of every person, not necessary. We have to agree everything what Prophet says. That's important. Quran, Sunnah, Ul Amr. And if there is ikhtilaf with Ul Amr also, we have to go back to Quran and Sunnah. But still, we can say there is injustice being done to both. And I have found Ghazali, he has been considered to be anti-science. And Ibn Taymiyyah's book, that's on logic. And I have written a complete 2 articles on this. How much relevant is his argument against logic, which was taken up by the Stuart Mill later on. Same arguments he has presented against logic, but those arguments were presented before him by Ibn Taymiyyah. But Stuart Mill is the scholar of logic, because Ibn Taymiyyah is against logic. So does it mean that you should accept everything, then you are only a philosopher? If you have rejected something by logic, you are a logician. Philosophy is not killed by philosophy. Logic is not killed by logic. So what is your way of argumentation? What are your arguments? What are the evidence? That's important. So in this way, we need to represent them both. And we need to write books on these people. Those belong to our legacy. They're our great people, as has been said by Shibli. He says, although I am a Hanafi, but if I can consider any person as the Mujaddid in real sense, that's Ibn Taymiyyah. He says, and one great, Islamic scholar whose name was Anwar Shah Kashmir, he belonged to Kashmir, great muhaddis of Deoband. He says, when I look towards Ibn Taymiyyah, I have to take care of my cap. He's like Jabal Ilm. So although they have difference of opinion, but they were acknowledging the contribution. That is important. Ikhlaf. Despite being, different from others, we need to acknowledge, but we can criticize also. And that was the tradition of Islam. Ghazali was criticized by Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd was criticized by other scholars later on. And Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi was criticized by Ghazali. Still they were flourishing. But their tradition died. We started eulogizing. We started idolizing people that they are idol worshipping. And that is the worst part. And West does not do that. They see whatever is relevant, let us take that at least. But then we just, as Ghazali had also warned against that, Marifatu Haq Birija. We should not know truth by persons, but persons by truth. So had we not done this, then we could have presented both. And we can also express our views about Ghazali. We may have differences at Ibn Taymiyyah, but we need to represent them in a proper way by seeing their books, the original books. And so far as, then is Ibn Sina and cause and effect. That is interesting. Ghazali has never denied cause and effect. He says that Qutun is not with, let's talk about that cotton and fire. So what is the necessary connection? So I would suggest when we keep, they are with each other, but it is not necessary connection. He denies a necessary connection. He does not deny connection. And further is a Lehman Oliver says, he talks about supernatural connection. Although Ibn Rushd has just talked about that when you are denying cause, you are denying everything, science, he says. And some other people have also talked that Ghazali should have not denied. But Ghazali's purpose was not this to deny the cause. He just wanted to make to the philosophers that if you don't understand anything, it does not mean that does not exist. So if you don't understand Moiza, it does not mean that has not happened. So you don't know many things. It does not mean that it was not there. It was there. There may be many causes. And I have written a complete article on this. Ghazali's arguments on causation, Copenhagen interpretation, and David Hume. David Hume has also said same things, but he is considered to be father of skepticism. But Ghazali is being misrepresented in this. Otherwise, he is not denied. Because had he denied science, he would have never said it that all the Muslims are going for fiqh. No Muslim is going for tib. And Ghazali says how strange it is that according to the Sharia, we can't accept the witness of a zimmi, but we can accept to get treated by him. Why all Muslims are not, why some Muslims are not going for tib, that is medicine? Why are they going only for? And he says why they go, because they want to do the orphan's property. And then they want to also galvanize endowments. Ghazali says in his Ahl al-Uddin. So then he categorizes the sciences and he says there is Farzul al-Kifaya, Farzul Ain, Farzul Alain. Some people have to definitely deal with these sciences. So he never denied science, as was alleged by Ibn Rushd, that he denies science. He never denied science. And rather, I have written a complete article, Ghazali and Natural Sciences. Because there were many people, they say Ghazali was responsible for the decline of science in the Islamic world. Then that was published in Hamdard Islamicus in Pakistan, long back. Because one of the professors of Kashmir, the elegant, Irfan Habib had said it. He said Ghazali has said much nonsense. He was quoting 50. Then they wrote an article by the name, has Ghazali said nonsense? then article was published by this Hamdard Islamicus, Ghazali and Natural Sciences. Then I gave that article to Irfan Habib Sahab, he knows. And he was okay, now I'm happy that you have told us everything about Ghazali. The problem is there is a lot of misconception about Ghazali also. He has never denied science. And even when he denied cause and effect, that was for a reason. That was just canonist philosophers. Every knowledge is not with you. We do know many things. We can know many things later on. And there may be not only one cause, there may be many causes. And there may be known and unknown causes. And we may not know all the causes. But if we don't know anything, it does not mean it does not happen. And that has been the interpretation has been accepted by Copenhagen interpretation also. And in this way, he has not denied neither causation in that sense, nor he has denied science. But what should be our attitude? Our attitude should be whatever is relevant in the philosophy of Ghazali to modern times, because he was a man of his own times. It is only Quran, Revelation, and the Prophet whose teaching is valid for all times to come. Because ijtihad is limited to its own time. In the Hakima is ijtihada fa asaba falahu ajran, wa in ijtihada fa akhta falahu ajrun. They did their ijtihad for their times and they were successful. We need to do our ijtihad for our modern times, but take help from the ijtihad they have done. And in this way, then we can just present everything in I should say, sequence, as has been said by Professor Abdulaziz Bargout. He says rightly, we need to develop a new philosophy that is totally based on Quran and Sunnah, but we have to take help from our legacy because they were the great people. And we have to present them, not allow people to misrepresent them, because that belonged to our legacy. So they were the people who have tread the path of Anamta alayhim. Allah had anam on them, and they just played their very important role. And we are known by their works also, and world knows us because of them. And we make them to known to the world, so that in the real sense of the word, and taking help from their ijtihadat, we can go ahead with our own ijtihad according to modern needs and requirements. Thank you very much.
I have a question. You took me back to my study days in Aligarh Muslim University, Professor Hamidullah. And this is what he told us. If you want to remember Ghazali, just remember 1111. 1111. That is the date. That is the date of his death. So it's easy to remember when al-Ghazzali existed. Right. You are right. You know when I very much enriched from your article, because the Quran in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, it is said, "Yu'allimul kitab wal hikmah." But we have created this diversion that we look only at the kitab, but don't see the hikmah side of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, the problem is that Ghazali had, as you said rightly, existential crisis, his own psychological crisis, but we have made this crisis the crisis of the Ummah. That's why the Ummah is in deadlock. It cannot go beyond that intellectual deadlock. And so much so that even Marshall Hodgson says that when he compares a philosopher and a Sufi, he says a philosopher knows what a Sufi sees. So this is, or Sufi sees what philosopher knows. While the Jewish Kalam benefited from the Muslim Kalam. Wolfson's most important book, that in the 14th century Jewish Kalam, the Jews never had a Kalam, Ilmul Kalam. It started because of Islamic contribution to Muslim Kalam. So while here in Southeast Asia, al-Ghazali is not known for his Maqasid al-Falasifa, but for his Maqasid Munkid min al-Dalal and his Sufism and his Iyal Ulumuddin. So my observation is this, that the Orientalists have created a specialized classification or a category of Sufism. It is an Orientalist invention, which we Muslims are stuck in. We are not able to go over this Orientalist creation. The Sufism is the solution for Islam, and not an integrated view. As you said, we need Ibn Taymiyyah, we need Shah Waliullah, we need everyone, a cumulative understanding of Islamic thought. Then only we can overcome this crisis of deadlock which we are in. So just sharing my thoughts with you.
So just one point, there was one question, was it because of his Sufism that he did not write on philosophy and science? Sufism was his personal problem. Because he was a sincere man, and I think sometimes, maybe you will not agree with me, Western civilization takes us to materialism, but Islamic civilization took us to spirituality. You could not be without spirituality when you were a real Muslim. Finally, that is the destiny. We have to go to God. We have to face Allah. And that was the feeling of Ghazali also. Worldly things should not make us to deter from that place. And as Western civilization makes us very much engrossed in the materialistic and pursuits and hedonistic pursuits, Islamic thought takes us finally to, and for that reason, most of our scholars of the past, they were spiritually oriented. They were and Ghazali was no exception. You may take any person, Ghazali, even people have talked about Ibn Taymiyyah. He was initiated with Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani's thought that Qadriya Silsila. And he wrote about 100 pages on Fathul Rabbani of Sheikh Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. And he used to offer 200 rakah to understand one verse. And the very important point for the Sufis is go for nawafil. يَتَقَرَّبُ بِنَوَافِلِ إِنَّ الْعَبْدُ إِذَا يَتَقَرَّبُ بِنَوَافِلِ. So what is Sufism? Is not something, only to be in khanqa. Yeah, mashallah, he has some question, my friend.
Ask something which I'm thinking of the Europeans label Ghazali as Bidatul Islam, the proof of Islam. I was just wondering whether European philosophy or European philosophies for the last 500 years, we call it epistemes and thought systems. Can we see or interpret as a misguided version of philosophy during the time of Ghazali and during that time before the fall of that?
Yeah, very good question. Basically, we have to understand what was the meaning of philosophy during the time of Ghazali. And that's we are not contextualizing that philosophy. We are talking about Ghazali's philosophy out of context. See what he did with philosophy during this time and what he meant by philosophy. What we mean by philosophy is different from what he meant by philosophy. That's the point. And that's the point which has been raised by Stephen Hawking, as I mentioned. So once upon a time, philosophers used to talk about origin of the universe, origin of life. Now it talks about what is language, what I come down, says Stephen Hawking. Philosophy is now news from nowhere, elimination of metaphysics and verifiability principle by the logical positivists. I have studied this philosophy. So there is no scope for anything else than language in modern philosophy or existence. So in this way, Ghazali has been misunderstood and misrepresented both. Not only misunderstood.
I'm not saying that he has been misunderstood by the West. That the West has benefited from the atmosphere of Islam at the time, and the West took it subconsciously.
You're right.
And what came up, for example, was existentialism. Perhaps the circulation of ideas over the centuries that finally came to be known as the various Western philosophies.
You're right.
And again, how do we Muslims, this is one question, how do we Muslims respond to that?
Yeah.
We always criticize the West as the West. But I have thinking that the West will have, again, a misguided version of philosophy or misguided version of Islam that creates that Western philosophy, continental or British.
Yeah, this is a good question. Basically, I am a student of philosophy. I had been in JNU also, that is totally Western philosophy. And then Aligarh, I was there. Aligarh is Muslim philosophy and Tasawwuf, but in JNU, it was Western philosophy altogether. I could have some view about modern Western philosophy. They have their own philosophy. There is reason, because behind every philosophy, there is Weltanschauung, worldview. So this West has tried to come out from its religious past, that I do need to explain that, Enlightenment and Renaissance and all these things. So now there was no need for the theological, foundation, foregrounding for philosophy. But in our case, there was always foregrounding. It was known as Ilahiyat. Ilahiyat, that was Ma'badu Tabiyat was Ilahiyat, which was talking always about God. So in this way, but they have benefited from our philosophy. They have benefited from Ghazali, and it was interesting, Sa'dun, and then, there were Maimonides. He has quoted Ghazali's verbatim, and then Akna Nas in his Summa Theologica. So he has talked about Ghazali, quoted him, and they used to write in Arabic. For example, Maimonides wrote his book, and that is Dalil al-Hairin, the guide to the perplexed in Arabic. And he quotes Ghazali. And I have seen several similarities between Ghazali and Kant, Descartes, Hume, Pascal, and Aquinas. In this way, they have benefited from our philosophy, but they are just, as I sometimes say it, as we have Greek medicine and we have allopathic medicine. So Greek people are taking this people from allopathic medicine, they take their, I should say, the cream of the medicine and make it a pill. But we keep on just repeating all the practices of the Greek medicine and boiling, doing this, that. So that was it, because they believe in more in synthesis. But we are taking not only synthesis, but we are just sometimes thesis, antithesis, all the things together. It has been said by some scholar, I'm just concluding. There is one, they say that as we have B, 3 types of knowledge is there. One is Nahli, second is Ankubuti, third is Damali. This has been mentioned by our scholars. No approach to knowledge should be like the honeybee. West is taking nectar from the flowers and makes it something new. But ant is just assembling things from here and there at one place. And Ankubut is just that, whatever is inside that is bringing out. So in this, we need that approach, synthetic approach. And West has done that. They have taken good from us, whatever was there. And they have left other things. But we have been left with other things, bones, dry bones. And we are discussing those dry bones. And we are just thinking, what is this, what is belief, but what is that? And we are still going after al-Kalam and the problems which were left behind by philosophers those days, we are discussing still. As Iqbal says, Aaj kya hai, faqat ek masla hai ilm-ul-kalam. Tawheed was once a reality, living reality. Now it is the problem of ilm-ul-kalam. So it is, something is with us. And this is, alhamdulillah, Triple IIT and Istac, they are trying to revive that approach, which is Islamic Asalatul, Jadida, as has been said by Abdul Hamid Sulaiman, that we have to come to modern problems from the Islamic point of view, not only from the philosophical point of view of the past, because that had its own problems. We have different problems, although we have not to break with the past. Continuity, we have to keep, but also whatever was there, we have to keep continuity with that, but we have to also see the change. So in this way, our philosophical approach has to undergo some change. Western approach to philosophy has undergone change, but our approach to philosophy has not undergone any change. That is the problem. For that reason, we are not able to accommodate philosophy within our syllabi or our curriculum. And we are going the way we used to go about 600 years back. So we have to change it. And this point was raised by Jamal Afghani at Azhar and by Faruqi. He also in the USA. So they have written about that. So what are the relevant problems today? So we should accommodate those problems within our Islamic contours, and then we can go ahead, rather than harping after those issues which were discussed about 500-600 years before. And only we have to take relevant aspects from that ilm al-kalam and philosophy, and then go according to Quranic lines. And I will end with this. We need also Islamization of philosophy. And I have just shown 6 stages of Muslim philosophy. First stage started with when Quran came, tafakkur, tadabbur, ta'akkul, and also basira. Quran is hikmah. And this was the first stage when Muslims started thinking on Quranic lines and new thought came to fore. And afterwards, Greek books were translated. And that was second stage. Then commentaries on the Greek books were made. That was third stage. Then critique of the Greek books started with Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, others. That was fourth stage. And then Islamization of philosophy took place, as Ghazali also wrote different books. He said there's something wrong, it is un-Islamic. And then Ibn Taymiyyah and Iqbal and Marazi, Faruqi and Abdul Hamid Sulaiman and Istac and mashallah Triple IIT. Now they are doing that Islamization of philosophy even, and we need also Islamization of language sometimes, because unless and until we have the world view. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Categorized philosophy as medieval, modern, it's beyond, it transcends modernity. It has no Middle Age or medieval philosophy like European philosophy. So that categorization, that polarization must be This structure can be found.
You're right.
Now, we are following the West in terms of how they define their philosophy.
Yeah, that's true. And we need to build on our own, premises. That's very important. And that can be done, inshallah. People are doing, alhamdulillah, some people are doing, but we are not much in philosophy. That's the problem. And we need to have a philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, our own version of that. And we should not hop after the Western philosophies of religion, because I've been teaching this. I face a lot of problems, And we need to develop our own understanding about comparative religions, methodology about religion, methodology about philosophy. And inshallah, but we can do that, inshallah, if we have resolve. And that is possible. When we did it in the past, why not in the present? But we need resolve. And for that, we need institutions. We need, support. And governments, Islamic governments, Muslim governments should also do something. Because West has a philosophy, Islam has a philosophy. And then we can have philosophical and ideological dialogues with them. And then we can have our own understanding about things. And then we can come out with a new philosophy, which will be beneficial to West in modern times also. Because as has been said by Abul Hasan al-Nadawi, he says, Isma'i ya Misr, O Misr, listen, become the bridge between East and the West. Let us take technology and science from the West, give them the values and ethics and morality. So we need to give something to the West, as we gave once. But last time we gave them technology and science, but now we need to give them values and meaning of life. Because after postmodernism, there are no grand narratives. And the last man, that end of history and the last man, now that has lost its value and the relevance. Now we need to come to the fore and come out with the alternative about the metaphysical problems and the ontological problems with Islamic Weltanschauung. And then be well versed also with Western philosophy. And unless and until we know, as has been said by Ghazali, if you do know something, you become victim of that. So this we do know the West will become victim of their philosophies, as you said rightly. So if we know Western, we'll be careful. So what is Islamic and what is not Islamic? Otherwise, we consider something which is un-Islamic as Islamic, and we propagate that. So unless and until we become master, as Ghazali said in his book, that is Tahab to Philosophy and Maqal Philosophy, unless and until we master the philosophy of the Greeks, we should not, criticize it. We should not rebut it. And the best word is rebut, rather than, and it was said to me by Professor T.B. Irving. He said, don't say rejection, condemnation of philosophy, rejection of, say rebuttal of philosophy. So rebuttal is better. Because we have not condemned it, we have rebutted it. But when we say condemned, it means there is no hope for philosophy in Islam. That is wrong. And philosophy can't be killed by philosophy. Logic can't be killed by logic. So in this way, we can come out with a better philosophy for the world, which has implications for life. Because philosophy had no implications for life during medieval times. Thank you.
It's very, very interesting discussion about philosophy here. It's happening. Just to share my experience, in 2002, when I came back to Malaysia from the UK, many of the philosophy departments in the UK was closing down. I don't think Western world actually believes in philosophy anymore. They actually believe in scientism, which is more, appropriate to them now. Many philosophy departments have closed down, and they are, as Professor has said just now, as that statement by Stephen Hawking, yes? Stephen Hawking. Yeah. How philosophy has become not to solve problems, but it's just become something to do with language. And that's it. It's become more of a language game. Use the Wittgensteinian, term. Anyway, there's a lot of things to discuss, to think. I don't think we have done justice at all in regards to this discussion today. But it's a way forward. I would like to thank everybody who have come and asked questions. I'm very sorry if I did not I was not able to respond to your questions, but it was a very, very good discussion with Professor, and we are really fortunate to have Professor here today with us. And I think we are very thankful, and we hope you will come again and give us another lecture. We can have talk until Maghrib time, inshallah. I think that's about it for today. Thank everyone for coming, and please remember there is a prayer for janazah of our great thinker before. That will be after Zuhr prayers. Yeah, Imam? Yeah, okay. So inshallah, with that, let's end today's lecture with and Surah Al-Asr.